Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am Sabha and I handle partnership and alliances with LinkCxO. I am excited to introduce our moderator today, Mr. Rajesh Padmanabhan. He is our chief mentor with wealth of experience in industries and consulting. He has worked with leading corporates like Capgemini, the Oberoi Group, Wellspun Group, Vedanta Group, ICICI Bank, and ICAT. Thank you, RP, for joining us today, and over to you to guide us through this exciting session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sabha. Just a quick audio check. I'm coming across well, right?
Yes. Good.
Thank you. Thank you. So, welcome to the session, and I'm sure all of you are intrigued by the title of the session, Find Your Next CxO Role. What's this all about? I remember, years ago, the entire, I was put through a simple question. Can you define leadership in one word? And if you do a Googling on the word leadership, I'm sure we can get at least 1,000 pages on Google. So it's not going to be easy. So I was put in a spot. And I did have a little bit of an aid in terms of asking me, is this a process? Is this a architecture? Is this a function? How would you define? So purely from a practical experience standpoint, I said leadership is energy, and I'm still holding that particular definition. It's all about energy that leaders bring into the organization to drive the organization or steer the organization forward. I'm delighted to have a wealth of experience in this particular panel, and you can see Madhavi, who is the MD and head of HR for Deutsche Bank. Thanks so much, Madhavi, for joining. I'm sure we're going to lean on your experience and wisdom in this particular session.
Thanks for inviting me, Rajesh. Thank you.
Thanks. Can I ask Ranga to come in? Ranganathan, Srinivasan from Bosch Technology. Ranga, again, an industry veteran, does a humongous amount of pioneering work in this particular space and is seeing a lot of transition that's happening in the industry. So I'm sure, Ranga, you're going to add a lot of knowledge into this particular session, and we're very keen to hear from you as well. Thanks so much for joining, Ranga.
Thank you, Rajesh. Happy to be here.
The third co-panelist is Priyanka Prabhudesai. Priyanka, welcome to the session. And I think I'm quite curious to hear at least some parts of the transformation story in this particular session, particularly when we're talking about leadership. And I'm curious to hear the Slumberjays journey from a energy company to a tech company. That's an important transformation. So I'm sure you're going to bring in some aspects of those into this particular session. Thank you so much, Priyanka, for joining this. And we're going to learn a lot from you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Thanks. So let me start the genesis of this particular session. Why this particular session? The first hypothesis or the first assumption that we started with was, I'm possibly spinning an India story right now, but I'll give you some global data points as well. So if you were to just look at India as an economy today, we all know that it's the fifth largest and all those parts. But purely going on the GDP aspect of growth, if India were to touch a $5 trillion economy, the leadership void in the industry is going to be something like an 18 to 22%, assuming we touch 5 trillion by either by 26 or 27. By running estimates at this stage, it looks more likely 27. But if there's a fast track of GDP growth, which goes beyond 6.5, I think then there's going to be a massive amount of leadership void. On the global front, it's anywhere from 12 to 13% kind of a void. And when I'm putting global, I'm actually putting and normalizing this across, because there are faster economies, there are slower economies, there are some flat structures as well. So nevertheless, I think there's going to be a huge amount of void. So assumption number one, how are we going to deal with it? It's always been a challenge. The challenge possibly accentuates or intensifies. Challenge number two, and I did allude to the point that I mentioned before when I mentioned Priyanka. Is it build versus buy? I'm sure all of us keep going through these challenges. Are we going to buy leaders from the marketplace, or are we going to build our own leaders? I think the simple and plain straight answer could be that both coexist. But there are a lot of companies who believe a lot in internal talent and a lot believe in hiring the right capabilities from the marketplace. All of us understand they've got to coexist, but how do we handle this entire aspect? And how do we deal with this in this rapid transformation and new age? That's the second assumption. So I thought it's good to hear from the leaders. The third one is tech is a massive disruptor. And definitely, I think someone like Ranga will add a lot of value there when he's going through the entire leadership hiring. It's a massive disruptor. And it's not a massive disruptor just for the people model part of it, from a business model also. So how do we really look at capabilities? And interestingly, I'm bringing in a concept where I'm saying, decision makers who are like sitting at the top of the pyramid are actually guys who are like technologically not very agile, but they have actually gone through it. They've all been natives. They're possibly learning it, and they're learning it at a very quick pace. But that also leaves a lot of decision making that they need to do across the enterprise. So that's assumption number 3. How does this all play in, particularly from a leadership standpoint? The fourth one is something which I'm very passionate about, and I believe that I don't use the word balance work life anymore. I balance work life. I use balance life work. I mean, there's a clear shift, and all of us having gone through the pandemic, and all of us understand this. Don't need to say anything more, but we understand that work is just a subset of life, and let's not reverse that. What we have been practicing for decades. So we used to find life when we had time out of work, but that's changed. So the entire model of work life has changed to life work. That's assumption number 4. And the fifth one is experience versus career tracks. People are trading in all kinds of experience, whether it is like, large enterprises to startups, or whether it is like purpose driven or taking a sabbatical. Everything is like, an acceptable norm today. There's nothing like a conventional track that one leader needs to go through. So with all these changes, how are we finding the next CxO role is what the entire topic is all about. And at the end, I'll possibly bring in some aspects of how the entire topic is possibly going to conclude in terms of our own thinking from a LinkCxO platform. So with that, I possibly open the topic for a big broader discussion, and I'll turn to each one of you, starting with Madhavi, and I want responses from all 3 of you on the first one. What are the top trends as far as CxOs are concerned in the marketplace? What are some of the top trends that you said, besides some of the points that I did mention? I'm sure each of you are seeing it through your own eyes. What are some of the top trends that you're seeing? Madhavi?
Thanks, Rajesh. And I think you set the context so well, and I was thinking as you were talking, I think, honestly, leadership is a very complex topic. And like you said, if you do a Google, there's just pages and pages of books of research on leadership, right? I think today leadership is being sort of constantly redefined. So if I look at my career, when I started 30 years ago, there was a particular way, leadership success was defined. That has changed dramatically, but it's not that it's now cast in stone. It's constantly being redefined. And I think that's what I would leave a message that it's an evolving kind of, framework. There are a lot of factors why this is becoming a little more complex, because, you have a lot of changes in the workplace as well. You have multi-generational workforce, you have hybrid working, you have technology sort of, disrupting a lot of the way we do business. So leadership also has to then keep pace, with change. And I think I like what you said about, how do you define the traits of a leader? I mean, it's so complex. It's almost like defining a super person, and so I think my sort of take from this session, and I'm looking to learn as much as, I'm happy to share my perspectives, is that the role of a leader is becoming more and more about how do people in your organization experience your leadership. That's what I think it's becoming about. It is about how do you get each person who is in that organization to contribute their best for the organization's success. And I know it's a tall ask, but it's doable. And there are various ways that leaders can evolve to make that happen.
Thanks, Madhavi. But do you see any quick top trend? Anything that's trending in the space of CxOs that we should factor in the session?
I think more and more people are looking for leaders who can build teams, not leaders who can just sort of, deliver the business. The delivery of business, a lot of people can do. But I think companies are looking at somebody who can take the organization to the next level, to the next sort of big thing, for the future.
Awesome. Very well put. So can I add a word, winning teams, build winning teams?
Build winning teams for the future-oriented winning teams. Yes.
Great. Thanks so much, Madhavi. Priyanka, can you step in and what are some of the top trends you are seeing in the CxO market?
Sure, certainly. Like Madhavi said, and you said the context, right? It is an evolving, journey, and it is very, very important that we are catching up continuously, as fast as the gears are shifting, right? For me personally, I think people centricity, along with your customer centricity, is equally important, and having the analytical mindset is going to definitely help one, right? So for sure, people, customer, as well as highly digital savvy is going to really help you be a part of the game.
Great. So if I were to summarize, I think digital and technology lineage is going to be important, and the convergence of people centricity and business centricity. Thanks so much, Priyanka. Ranga, your turn. I want to hear what are some of the top trends you're seeing.
Yeah, so I think there are more CxO jobs than ever. I think that's one clear trend. Because in the post-COVID scenario, I think the definition of VUCA has changed completely. And in the digital blowout that we have seen in 2022, and then the subsequent corrections of the current year, and maybe it will continue to next year, there is a lot of fresh thinking and fresh leadership which is required by most organizations, whether, as you have rightly said, whether they are startups or they are established organizations or traditional organizations. The need to think differently from the current ecosystem exists in every organization. So to me, I think the biggest trend that is emerging is one. 10 years back, we would have seen only success stories of, let's say, CEOs, right? But in the current ages or in the current scenario, we are basically seeing openly CEOs struggling, CEOs not succeeding, and also CEOs, setting themselves apart with the kind of vision and then eventually succeeding, right? So to me, functional skills, leadership skills, the other management skills that we used to talk about have truly become table stakes to get into a CEO or a CxO role for that matter. I think the one factor that is really standing out and differentiating itself in a CEO who succeeds and vis-a-vis a CEO who fails is resilience, right? So whether the person is able to adapt to a particular situation, adapt to the culture, perform in that culture, able to adapt their style of working to be able to become one with the ecosystem so that they're able to deliver results through that ecosystem. I think there are multiple such factors, but it centralizes itself to the quality of being able to be, or to the quality of being resilient, basically. To me, that is the biggest trend that for me is emerging.
Awesome, Ranga. I think sharp top 3 points that I pick up from your narration. One is CxO jobs more than before, trend number 1. Trend number 2 is, not succeeding. Failures are also quite rampant and seen. Very nice point, and thanks for bringing it out. And third is, I think, the need for resistance. Resilience and tenacity much more than what it used to be. Awesome points. I think all 3 of you have contributed. So I think with that, the stage is absolutely set. I would just want to add just one more factor, one data point to what Ranga said. The average shelf life of a CxO in a role continues to be anywhere from a 1.8 to 2.7 years globally. So that says it all, right? And this is exactly similar to what would be for an infant or an infancy rate, which is again anywhere between 2 to 3 years. So look at the top of the organization, which is like 1 to 1.8 to 2.6, and the bottom of the organization, which is between 2 to 3. Then the belly of the organization really depends upon that. So that's the challenge. So thanks for bringing it out, and I'm able to add a data point to that. We move on to topic number 2, and Ranga, I want you to come into to this particular topic, and which is tech. We all have heard that, and we all are seeing that it's possibly the biggest common denominator which drives success. Having said this, I think we're also coming from the fact that technology today in industrialized hiring is far more successful with AI and generative AI and lots of stuff having been done, and it's really peaking. But anything that you see in the space of leadership, so do you see technology helping leadership hiring? Or is it still a very conventional model, which is traditional face-to-face, discrete hiring? How are you seeing it? And I'm sure you're very closely exposed to this world. So how are you seeing it?
Well, in terms of leadership hiring, there is definitely the advent of technology in the leadership hiring space, right? With most of the social networking channels pertaining to professional networks being democratized, right? There is a need to have a focused attention on, the CxO, people who play the CxO roles, because their kind of experiences, their kind of challenges is very different, and they would definitely need different channels to be able to share and gain insight from others who are doing similar roles. So social networking, to a certain extent, concentrated on folks doing leadership jobs is definitely something that's coming up new. That is something that I definitely see. Right? In terms of technology augmentation in leadership hiring, as as you rightly said, there is a lot of recruitment automation, AI, generative AI, and the likes of it, which have embedded themselves in voluminous hiring. However, in my perspective, leadership hiring continues to be a process where every organization tries to provide a personalized effort and a personalized experience. And to a certain extent, that is the expectation from the candidate or the person who's going through the process as well, because she or he wants to understand what the company is all about, what is the ethos of the organization, what is the role that the individual will be playing, so on and so forth. That really cannot be dealt with in detail just through technological channels, such as right. You can always look at web-based interface, so on and so forth. So I feel that the democratization of technology has happened more on volume hiring, but to me, the leadership hiring continues to remain very personal, because it's still not voluminous in any organization, and it continues to be anchored at a very personal level through face-to-face discussions and interactions, because it's important to assess the candidate who's applying for a leadership role accordingly, and also for the candidate to understand the role and the ethos of the company, and that can only happen when the person goes through a certain level of physical interaction, so to say.
Thank you, Ranga. I think you've taken a position, and I respect that. So you're saying it's much more personalized, it's still custom built, it is still legacy driven. So point taken, I think. And to the extent of social, there's a lot of influencing of that happening. I do have some views, but I'll hold that. I want to turn to Priyanka for this. I'm sure how are you seeing it in your real world? And since you shifted, I'm sure you're seeing technology as a big denominator. So just a quick top up on this particular point from you, Priyanka.
Sure. I mean, associated to a company which is shifted from a traditional to a absolutely new age technology. Not that we did not acknowledge the importance of technology. It's just that being with the trend, right? So oil and gas as an industry, which is our bread butter, is shifting gears towards technology, right? And amalgamation of both is very, very important, because we definitely are moving towards using the technology to our benefit, right? Where we used to spend a lot of energy in just getting to know where your oil reservoir is. Today, we have a technology of a pathfinder that is with a click of a button can show you the path and the direction of how to drill, right? And which reservoir is going to give you the most maximum yields. So these kind of decision making, remote operation, sitting in an office environment and actually measuring the performance of a oil well is the best thing today that you can have, right? So using people to its expertise and using technology to enable people to perform and teams to perform is a great vision that the organization has put forward. So yeah.
Thank you. I think I'm just thinking in my own head. I'm sure when you're hiring leaders from the marketplace, the tech agility or the entire the ability to relate with technology is something which has a lot of importance. I'm sure you're looking at that very closely.
No,
Thanks,
absolutely.
Priyanka. That is a good dimension that you provided. Madhavi, I'm going to turn to you for a different topic, and I'm sure you've done a humongous amount of work on culture. So cultural fits of leaders and their success. Yeah, success versus failure. We've often heard this, and I'm sure we keep having our own challenges. Capability versus culture. You hire the best of leaders, get them in, but then culture. How do you look at it? Culture fits of leaders whom you get into the organization, and deriving success versus failures.
It's a really good question, and I in the sort of I know to keep the answer a little brief. I think culture is contextual, and so if you're looking, so I don't think there's a one right answer to this sort of point. If you're looking, if you're an organization that just wants to grow, you're already doing well and you want to grow, you will get somebody who's a good cultural fit, who can come in, rally the team around, inspire the team, and then sort of grow the business. But if you're an organization that's struggling a bit and you want to change the culture, so I think the first step before hiring a leader for any organization is to figure out that, do you want somebody who will come and change the culture for better, or you want somebody who, we've already got a good culture, we've got to just sustain it. So I think that definition should be clarified before you go and hire a leader, and because that determines the kind of person you will bring in. There are leaders who are good at sustaining a good culture and growing it and expanding and and bringing that quantum growth in the business of the organization. But there are people who can come and change for the better. So I think that's what I would say. It's contextual. It's a very important part of leadership hiring, because if you, like you said, if you hire the wrong person, things can go the other way quite soon. And that's at senior levels, it does become difficult to then sort of exit out of that relationship, because you're relying on one person, to kind of one leader right now. If it doesn't work, then how much time do you give that person to turn around or whatever? How much time do you spend on development of that person? It's a lot of cost for the organization as well. So I would say it's a difficult topic, but I would say to anybody who's looking at hiring leaders, define what you want out of that person. Do you want the person to be a change agent? Do you want the person to just sustain the culture and grow? So that's where my point of view is on this one.
Thank you. Ranga, I would turn to you for a brief top-up. And I did hear you touch upon it briefly in the first part of your narration. So how important is culture, and how do you see it, and how do you ready it?
See, basically, as Madhavi rightly said, it is unequivocally the most important aspect of hiring. As I said, the other competencies really are table stakes, right? But to me, and in my experience, if an organization is going outside its current ecosystem to hire someone for the top job, any of the top jobs, it's a significant amount of, over and above the cost of hiring, right? It's also a significant amount of investment of the board or the executive board's time, right? And in my experience, those typically happen in situations where the individual is expected to come in and be a change manager, right? Because typically, if it could be done from within, right, then a person from within the ecosystem would typically be elevated to the top job. But if the top job is attracting a person from outside, then typically it is because the organization wants to change certain aspects of its cultural or operating ecosystem, which they seek help from in terms of external professionals. So I think change management is an extremely important aspect of competence that a leader coming from outside should have. So if there is a candidate who's applying to a company, they should clearly be aware that over and above their competence in the functional matters, they clearly need to be a change manager to be able to respond better to the market or respond better to the ecosystem, and be able to understand what the organizational expectation is from them.
Thank you, Ranga and Madhavi. And this is music to my ears. Ranga, Priyanka, and Madhavi, I think I've done some humongous amount of research on culture, and I'm also fortunate to have coded and written an algorithm on measuring culture, and I have prototyped and tested it. So at some stage, I think we will have more discussions on this. It's a digital culture meter, which actually shows the needle in terms of how your organization is at any point of time. The architecture is there. I think the blog is also out there, and I'll probably send you links. You can go through it and give me your feed as well as I build it. So I think this is a great topic, and I'm sure we can't do justice in 3 to 5 minutes, but we'll build
Rajesh, can I chip in?
Priyanka,
Can I chip in? Can I just chip in because what you said just now was kind of music to my ears, and I'm going to link it to your previous question on leadership hiring. Obviously, AI and all have a great role to play in hiring, and I kind of agree with Ranga that at senior levels it's more personal, but tools like what you've talked about can actually make life easier for leadership hiring, because you can actually then assess the person for cultural fitment aligned to your leadership sort of framework of the organization. So I think there is a marriage of the two.
Thank you, Madhavi. Yeah, I'd love to go on this for the next 45 minutes because, and I'm really itching to go, but I'll possibly.
Sorry to chip in, and I just thought it was.
Yeah, but this is a very interesting. No. I think thanks for that. Thanks for reaffirmation, and I'll possibly pick this conversation with you. Priyanka, internal talent versus external talent. How do you really balance it? Yeah, both are important. I think the answer is always
right.
Both are important, except there are companies like P&G and all who heavily depend upon internal talent, and they go to market only for very select positions. But by and large, enterprises depend on both. How do you balance it, and how do you see it also as we move ahead?
Sure. I mean, I believe that I'm more of a believer of an internal versus external, frankly. But having spent like a decade in my previous company, which was very, very heavy on internal moves, right? And then the rest, half of the career has been with Schlumberger, SLB today, which is very heavy in promoting from within, right? We've been very, very confident of bringing in the best talent from the campus and grow the leaders for future, right? So it has, every coin has its both sides, right? So however, internal definitely gives you the confidence of a culture fit, of knowing your ways of working, knowing your operations. So you understand the business really well, you know what's expected, you're more aligned. On the other contrary, there's definitely benefits of bringing in an external candidate to the table, purely because it's more of outside in view, bringing in more fresh perspective, right? Sometimes you're very traditionally hung up, and you believe that that's the best way because you've seen that succeed, right? It's like a secret sauce of your organizational success, but sometimes inside, outside in view is equally important. So that freshness definitely is a positive when you look for outside, a little more ready in terms of specific technology. So it's always to weigh what are you trying to hire, right? And then do that balancing act. If it's definitely a core C-suite role, I think culture fit is critical, and knowing your business is very critical. But if it's a technical C-suite role, then it could be looking at both views.
So a follow-on question to Priyanka. Sorry, I'm going to put you in a little bit of a spot. And this has got nothing to do with SLV or Slumberjee. I mean, that's not what I'm
Right,
hinting at.
right.
But generally, my research tells me that, companies which are very internally driven as far as leadership is concerned, the culture of, pushing out new guys who land in the system is a little high. So it's provocative for a conscious reason. So how would you defend this, or how would you build on this?
Okay, so if I got the question right, how are you going to kind of do that balancing act of bringing in a
Yeah, I mean,
technology
typically guys who,
person, right?
companies which are very dependent on internal leaders and grow it that way are not very welcoming of external people who get into the system. I understand it. SLB typically would hire a lot of specialists, but how do you deal with that situation? So, do you have something which is like cultural assimilation? Do you really handhold them? Do you really put in a coach to make it happen? Do you really have like big ears to really pick up what's happening in that space? How do you deal with it? I think that's the question.
It's very interesting conversation, right, Rajesh? Thanks for bringing it. And that's why I made that comment of, sometimes you're such a strong believer that what's been working right for years, you start to believe that that's the best way, right? When you bring in a C-suite, a senior leader from outside, it is very, very important. It is very important to handhold, because when I came in from outside, it was always a common thing that this is how we are. I mean, this is Slumberjee. The very fact is that you take so much of pride when you belong to that brand, right? And that pride kind of puts out very loud and clear that indirectly you're kind of closing doors to your and out,
Yeah.
perspective, right? So when you bring in from outside, very valid, Rajesh, you have to take double the effort to make the person feel included, and equally open to listen to those new views, right? Because there is somebody out there taking that decision to bring that person in for all the right reasons. But if you don't give that platform to be heard, or welcome new ideas, I think that would land up into a failure. So very, very valid. I hear
Thank
you
you.
on
Thank
that.
you. Yeah. In fact, I want to, narrate a small story from my side when I was switching jobs. I don't want to name. That's not the objective, but I was used to a very black or white, or a yes or a no, or a go or a no go kind of a company. That was the culture. Suddenly, I land up in another place where they said, "Don't worry about black or white. Even gray is fine." Yeah. And then by the time I settled down in the system, accepting that gray is fine, they show me shades of gray is also fine. Like, do you know whether it's dark gray or light gray or middle gray or whatever? So, okay, I think I'm still landing. And then, I get into nuances of saying I was used to more of decision making, like, things need to happen, like compulsively belong to that culture. Then suddenly here they say, forget about it. Let decision be an outcome of collaboration. If you're not collaborating, that decision doesn't really hold good. So focus more on collaboration. Decision will be an outcome. So I think those were, but was put through a very structured kind of an approach, and I did not even know I was going through it, but the change happened. So I think just wanted to narrate, and it was brilliant. It was so implicit. I had no idea that I was going through the change, but at the end of the journey, I felt that the change had happened. So awesome. I'm sure if I go to Ranga, he will want to see a lot on this, but I'm holding for want of time. But I'll turn to Ranga for a different question. And the question is hiring success factors. What are, if I were to ask you, Ranga, you're good at putting it in a few words. So a word cloud around what are hiring success factors of a CxO?
So I think if I were to look at it, time to start performing, time to be, so even before time to start performing, I think some of the key metrics would be time to become operational, right? Time to become, open for access for other senior management employees, time to start performing, time to start delivering the results, right? Time to adaptation, right? And some of these metrics are not going to be straightforward metrics that you can put a number to and measure, right? And these are really just at 100,000 feet level, right? And they'll have multiple subtasks broken down, which can be possibly measure as part of a standard 30, 60, 90, 180, 240-day plan, right? So I think the success really is whether the person is settling down and at each check-in stage, right? Typically, which is once every 2 months in the case of a senior executive. Is the person feeling comfortable, and is the organization feeling comfortable with their decision, right? And in a senior leadership role, your outcomes typically would not become visible before the first year is over.
Right.
Unless you are an absolutely critical job where you need to come in. For example, if you're the treasury head of a bank, right? And I'm sure Madhavi will empathize with me here. I mean, that's definitely something that you can't start floundering on day one, right? But in most of the roles in other organizations across industry segments that I have seen, it really takes some time for people to settle down and then start showing performance or showing productivity in a role. So till then, fortunately or unfortunately, it is word of mouth, or as we at the dreaded word which we call perception, right, which determines. But it's not just the perception of, and as Priyanka had rightly mentioned, it's not just how internal organizational folks see the leader, but also how the leader perceives the organization, because the leader also is a well-networked, well-established professional in her or his right. So, it's not just important for the organization to pass value judgments on the person's adaptability and ability to settle down, but also it's equally important to understand what the leader's perspective is about the organization aiding her or him in settling down within the organization, right? So those are really the factors that determine. So in the first 1 year, I think most of the metrics will be quite subjective, in my point of view, and it will be really dependent on how, what is the collaboration coefficient of the individual. Is the person adapting to the culture of the company, whether it is decisive or it is, a more of a consensus-based kind of an organization, whether the individual is able to change her or his behaviors to be able to adapt towards getting things done through the networks within the organization instead of driving everything herself or himself. So some of these things are things to watch out for, or which are actively, noticed on both sides, both on the leader side as well as the organization side, when a person starts to settle down in a particular organization.
Thank you. I got a lot of key points, but at the end, I think you were driving more towards culture, because I think if I heard operational, driving results, adaptability, so I think a lot got defined there. But thanks, Raga. I think you gave a lot of points around this, and thanks for bringing it in, in very quick time. Madhavi, longevity and time taken by a leader to start really performing, the point that Ranga said, yes, to start performing. Do organizations really have that kind of a window, or they start making judgments right up front? And is this something that's likely to change? Is it very intuitively done, or are we drawing judgments very quickly? How do you see this? Leaders from outside coming into a role, how do you deal with their performance? I'm sure you've been exposed to many leaders whom you would have hired. How do you deal with it, both internal to the organization and to the candidate as well? I mean, the candidate is, equally, as committed, he or she is committed. So how do you make it really work? Is it patience driven? Is it like, again, something which is cultural? Your words of wisdom on this.
So I personally think that one needs to have a very structured induction program for senior hires. Otherwise, there is never going to be a smooth induction in that sense. So at Deutsche Bank, we have sort of a well thought through induction plan for all hires actually, but also senior hires, definitely more one-to-one sessions. And obviously understanding the business, understanding the stakeholders, understanding the people. And it's kind of, woven into the first sort of 30, 45 days, so that the person, gets to understand, who are the key stakeholders for them, their team, their line manager, their peer group. And, there is obviously a lot of learning in terms of what are the do's and don'ts in the organization. We have certain mandatory learnings that we kind of have all new joiners go through, which kind of define how the bank operates, what are like some zero tolerance areas, what are if you're faced with a particular situation, what do you do, etc. So I think that structured program really helps. But I want to, any of the people on the audience, if you're sort of getting into a new role, read this book called The First 90 Days. It's a brilliant book. I always give it to people I know are getting into leadership roles. It's a very old book, so some of it may not be like the digital piece is not covered there, but that's something I'm sure one can pull in. So that's what I would say, Rajesh. And I think the onus is as much on the organization as on the individual to settle in. I always tell the people who are coming in new that the first 90 days, absorb, listen, understand, because what sometimes we tend to do, and all of us, we are like raring to go. We're joining this new organization, new role. You want to go and you want to say this is the way to do things. I think hold back that piece is what I normally say, and I try to do myself as well.
Thank you, Madhavi. I'm just watching the time as well. So I'm going to turn a little personal now. I'm sure if each of you can pick up, where your thinking had about having done a career change or a role change in the marketplace. Huh? I'm not talking about role change within the organization. What have been the top 2 or 3 parameters that have driven that decision? Yeah. Again, I'm looking at a feed as we build our marketplace from a LinkCxO standpoint. From leaders like you. So Madhavi, what personally drove you? I mean, you did not make too many changes, but nevertheless, I think whenever you made that change, what are those 2 or 3 dimensions that you looked at? And similarly, Priyanka and Ranga want to hear that. So if you can keep it brief, I'm looking at those sharp 2 or 3
I think for me, it's always
drivers.
been about what's the challenge in the role. If the role, and there was an organization in many eons ago, which I left because I just did not find it challenging enough. So for me, it was, what's the challenge in the role? Will I be fully stretched? And sometimes, people find that difficult to understand, but I really think that for me, that challenge of doing something, achieving something, that's really important. I need to feel that. So that's the reason. I think the other reason that I sort of made the change to my current organization also was, I think what the organization stood for gelled with me. The focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, the CSR efforts. I think that kind of spoke to me. I said, this is a place that I want to be, associated with.
Thank you. Challenge and personal relatedness are the 2 points that I'm picking up. Priyanka, maybe 1 or 2 dimensions that made you change and what really ticks you?
Sure. 2 clearly stand out is, one was purpose. Why and how? Because why are they bringing me in, and how do I see myself contributing to that purpose? Was clearly one of my decision-making factor. Second was diversity. SLB as an organization across, spread across the globe, and standing strong as number 1, right? So I think getting there is easier compared to sustaining. Right. So I was clearly thrilled with the fact that there was something, driving me to that, energy. And I knew it's going to keep me on my toes and keep me challenged.
Yeah. Thank you. I think it touched your soul. I think so. What I pick up is purpose and diversity, which really touched your soul. Ranga, what are the top 2 in your mind?
So for me, when I'm shifting a job, I always try to think, what am I trying to solve, right? What is it that I'm not getting in my current responsibility, or what is the issue that I have, which I'm trying to solve by moving to another organization? So I clearly try to outline from a role or from an experience standpoint, what is it that would happen differently in the organization. That's what I try to understand in my conversations. The second thing is a very clear and hard alignment to my values and ethics in the new organization. I think that these 2 for me are the most important factors.
I think there's a common resonance of particularly the relatedness, the personal values part of it, in all 3 of you mentioning, of course, use different words, but I think there's a personal connect and relatedness. And the first one was challenge, purpose in Priyanka's case, and solve in Ranga's case. Beautiful summary. I think I'm really enjoying this. Again, just watching time, and I want to build on a particular topic that we are really passionate about and which we are doing. And that's what you see in this. The entire LinkCxO is nothing but it's a platform play that we're trying to curate, build, And it's amazing the amount of traction and the amount of footfalls that we are having. It's already like 25,000 members plus. And why did we do this? I think it was not purely a networking community. We clearly believe that this is something which has got to be high content driven, where people see that there is some value in terms of content. And the content that they consume, it's not that content which generally keeps popping up all over. We are in an era of abundant amount of content coming from all over. So something that you can relate and really make it relevant, number one. Number two is CxOs communicating. It's a community which they like to communicate. I mean, just as we are communicating amongst ourselves, picking up from each other. There's a comfort, there's a relevance, there's a purpose. So there's a soul that comes into play. So there's the aspect of how do you communicate and collaborate as well. And collaborate would mean how do we take it to even jobs and relevance in the marketplace. Or we've also seen as we build this LinkCxO, there are a lot of business value propositions also which have come into play. So we're really perfecting this entire model, and at the back end is usually you have plenty of generative AI and ML that we really put together and creating value for the LinkCxOs. And also the connect is really coming together. People are saying that yes, I'm not saying that you need to really identify yourself as a niche community, but a value driven community, and also celebrating. I think there's a lot of credibility out there, and people are not shy to really display that. So this is what the architecture is. Now, the question is, we don't know whether we are on track or whether we need to refine, we would want to do, but I guess this is unique, this is distinct, and I'm happy and, to be absolutely mentoring this entire team of LinkCxO. So it's a fascinating team which has come together. My question to you is something like this of relevance? Do you see CxO community? And if there are some pieces of advice, we would be happy to factor that as well. And there are lots of stuff sitting out there, but they're largely networking. But this is very different in terms of the dimensions that I explained. So let me turn to Priyanka first. How do you see CxO, LinkCxO as a community? Do you see CxO as a community from a utility and a future standpoint?
Right. I mean, Rajesh, frankly, this is an excellent initiative, right? Whenever organizations are working towards building their workforce, it's always the bottom, mid, and the senior, just above the mid. But the CxO level typically is that you're organically landing there, right? You have to have something very substantial to get into that role. But if that can only give you a little more of uplift, a little more of coaching, a little more of platform for purposeful networking, because you can participate in events and exchange conversations, but I think a lot of that just fizzles out after that. But just creating a community for the CxOs and allowing them to really exchange their thoughts and views, I think is an excellent initiative.
Thank you. And I'm picking up the word coaching. I mean, that's very powerful. And if leaders can coach each other, I think that's great. But we do some parts of it, but I think we will take that feed and improve upon our next version. Ranga, what's your take on this?
Well, we are living in times where there is a lot of now more than ever is a need to create such a forum so that people can share ideas, also ensure that they are able to bounce off their thoughts with one another who are playing equitable roles in various organizations. Because I think the concept of decision making has gone from being extremely crisp to being extremely, as you had mentioned, Rajesh, in the gray, right? So now more than ever, I think validation from like-minded, similar-rolled professionals is critical, than at any other point in time.
Awesome. Thanks, Ranga. Sharp as always. Thank you. Thanks so much for that. Madhavi, how do you see CxO Marketplace?
I think it's fabulous because networking really helps, giving you a sort of a perspective, a contextual view. I think you can learn from people who've tried something and hasn't worked. And so your success can be faster, I think, with the learning. I just take this example. I'm a panelist in the session, and I've already learned how, how two organizations are doing things, in a different manner, or looking at things. Two people are looking at things from a different lens, right? So I think there's power to that. The whole, and I think I mentioned earlier that a CxO has to have listening skills, right? And I think if you can listen, understand, learn, adapt, I think that probably will make you hugely successful, in my view.
Thank you. Thank you, Madhavi. I think the conversation is really peaking, and I would love to go on and on, but I think we've got to respect time. There are some feeds of questions that have come in. So I think before we really wind up, we must take some of those. So Abhijit Das writes, the CxO role usually arrives just beyond the edge of senior mid-job grade. Given the usual way to evaluate fitment by checking the past credentials, how can one build a roadmap of skills and behaviors starting from the bottom of the pyramid so that raw materials shape well by the time one pitches for the first time CxO? So I think, Ranga, if you could take this. So the question, if I would really understand, and we could type an answer, but I would guess it would be a little longish. So basically, how does one roll over from a CxO -1 to a CxO is the way, I think the question is. And how can one build the roadmap of success? So how does one really know? Is this just a tick? Is there some preparedness? Are there some real stuff that one needs to really get it right before getting there? I think for the first time CxO, just as you become a first time manager, a first time CxO. Great question, Abhijit. Ranga, could you take this?
So I think, again, it's a great question. So most of the professionals in the early stages of their career, are people who want to be successful, focus a lot on building their functional skills, their technical skills. But there are two areas which go unnoticed, right? And unfortunately, by the time these professionals get to a stage where they want to take CxO roles, it's too late in the day to start building those skills. You can definitely build those skills, but it's better to build them along with your functional skills. And those two are, one is communication in various situations, right? And the second one is emotional quotient. Now, emotional quotient may sound extremely cliche, right? But many good professionals, especially in extremely hectic functions, such as finance, and people who are, let's say, in the technology industry who are working in production support, they tend to, be high performers, but they lose path of how they should be behaving internally in their ecosystem, whether it is, it is their subordinates or it's their peers, so on and so forth. So for me, I think being able to build a calm disposition, being able to build an aptitude which breeds positivity in the work environment right from the day you start working is as critical as building your functional and technical skills. Because over a period of time, your functional and technical skills will ripen and will become the best in the industry if you keep at it. But if you don't equally keep at building your persona, then you will find yourself to be in a soup when you're applying for the top job, because when people apply for the top job, then functional skills are table stakes, right? You need to develop them, but they're table stakes. What really distinguishes you as the front runner is your ability to deal with extremely difficult situation, ability to deal with constantly changing situations, and ability to deal with things that may go wrong all the time. So, and you will be able to have an aptitude towards managing only if you develop it right from day one of working.
Excellent point. Excellent point. I just want to add what you said, Ranga, on this particular question. Anyone who is a CxO -1 getting into a CxO actually is extremely vulnerable to even a trade-off in the marketplace. Do I really make this step up in here, or do I trade off in the marketplace? Do I play the waiting game? I think those aspects of it, and one need to take those decisions at that point of time, in my view. Unless you're able to take those crunch decisions, I guess you're never ready for leadership. And it's not a question of also believing whether it's right or wrong. And actually, that leads me to the next question, which is brilliant. Actually, so it's an anonymous attendee. I can't see the name, but the person is saying that he was laid off after 28 years. He was a CTO, and does not even get calls. So what happens to people who are like, faded off, not able to see light of the day? Madhavi, I think a difficult question, but I'm sure with your experience, you can guide. Uh, how do they bounce back? I mean, what would be your advice for people who have like, and to the other aspect of your question, LinkCxO is definitely something that you can, park your resume with. And I'm sure you can apply for a lot of jobs which get published there. So be part of LinkCxO is the second part. But Madhavi, I mean, how does
it's a very,
she, I don't
very,
know, deal
yeah,
with it?
no, it's a very tough situation to go in. I can relate to this, by the way. So I would say keep trying, talk to a lot of consultants. A lot of people ask me that, oh, I spoke to this consultant didn't respond. And I tell them, listen, the consultant is going to respond when they have a role, but keep trying, keep talking to a lot of consultants. Don't get disheartened. Because I remember there was one time in my career where I took 30 interviews before I got a job. And somebody said, I used to go for every single interview. I'm sharing this as a personal story. I went for every single interview. People said, why would you want to go to this company? I said, no, I'm open to any role. I'm open to any, and I think that's what I would say. Also look for roles which are on contract or consultancy type of roles. I would say, that's what I was saying. Don't give up, keep trying, talk to consultants. I think LinkCxO is a good sort of platform, and sort of, I would say stay positive. I know it's difficult. I'm not saying it's easy, but stay positive. And keep upskilling, make sure that you're not losing your skills because you're not working. And I tell you, today organizations are not hesitant to take people who have taken a break. We've got a program called Resume, where people who have left the workforce, for whatever reason, we don't even ask them what reason, 2, 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, we're taking them back. We're obviously working out ways to train them so that they can, come and, join an open role at the end of their training program. But there are organizations that are looking at those skills. So, yeah.
Reassuring. Madhavi.
All the best to whoever it is, all the best to you.
So there's one more. Thank you, Madhavi. I think that was very reassuring. There's one more anonymous one, which I think is important. So Priyanka, trust you to handle it a little briefly. We're just a minute or two away from closing. The person is asking, how does a typical CxO get that initial acceptance from the hiring leader or from the panel? What are some of the narratives that one should really put across, which strikes a chord? So how does one go about it? What is the magic bullet? How does the person make it really succeed? I know it's a tough one to answer in a minute, but take a shot.
Okay, sure. I'll give it a try. I think it's a combination. It's just not one element. It's your personal experience, exposure that you've built over years. It's a personal readiness of how ready you are and how difficult, how difficultly you think you're trying hard to bridge that gap of what you want to achieve, right? So your personal readiness. Third, definitely is the network that you've built, and expand the network, and the relationships that you have, who are going to stand in for you to help you succeed, because every leader has their own style, and it's unique to themselves. But if one has to really succeed in what they're doing, I think a combination of all is needed, right? Because every element is important.
Priyanka, I have no idea how you managed to do it in a minute, but a fascinating response to a tough one. Yeah, I'm sure all good things must come to an end. We can go on, and we're really peaking in this conversation. But just to respecting time, we need to put an end to this discussion. It's been fascinating. I think we've left a lot of points unfinished, but that's the spirit of conversations. Is this? I'm sure there have been plenty of takeaways from each one of you, and vice versa. There have been learnings for each one of us, and I'm sure we'll keep building this, and we'll keep giving this to the fraternity at large, and keep our connectedness as far as this entire space is concerned. Leadership is something which is very exciting, and all of us have committed our lives behind this, I'm sure. Thank you so much. I mean, it's been a fascinating discussion. And it also reaffirms and gives us plenty of conviction about the direction that we are taking in building this LinkCxO as a marketplace. And we we're almost thinking that it'll be over 100,000 by the end of the year. And it's really gaining acceleration and good amount of momentum is coming to play. We are on track. Some of the aspects that we've got through the session are factors which will be built into the upgrades. And that is exactly the way we will go on this journey. But thank you so much, Madhavi. Thank you so much, Ranga. Thank you so much, Priyanka. It's been fascinating contribution from each of you, and absolutely excited about the way we have gone through the session. Thank you, LinkCxO team, Sabha team, for putting this together. And thank you so much, a large number of delegates who really taken this time out on a Saturday to be part of this session. Thank you so much. And it's wonderful on a weekend to close on a high note. And back to you, Sabha. And thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Thank you so much, RP. Thank you, Madhavi. Thank you, Ranga. Thank you, Priyanka, for joining us today, taking some time for us. Let's stay in touch. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Have a good day
Bye.
ahead.
Bye.